how about a short video on the cult of the Les Paul Junior? It's a beautiful, beautiful guitar. It's probably my favourite guitar in terms of visual, and it's up there in terms of sound. And and if you get one, the last thing you should do is put a sticker on it. Two, but hey, shows how much I know. These guitars, for anyone who doesn't know, they were made in the mid-50s by Gibson. They were advertised as a student or ladies instrument, and these days I know you can get in trouble. We can all get in trouble with our personal pronouns, but the truth of the matter is it was advertised as a student or ladies instrument. They cost $97, which I'm sure was a heap of cash back in those days. But a lot, you see him, if you ever see that Tom Hanks film, Do the Right Thing, the guy in the band is playing, Junior. And I think there were a lot of them about because they were, it's a fairly buoyant economy, and a lot of people had them. I don't know if they languished, but they didn't achieve this level of fame until about 15 years later, when guys started to buy them in pawn shops for $50. If you'd read Ian Hunter's Diary of a Rock and Roll Star, and I heartily recommend that you do, because it's one of the best books on rock and roll ever. There are loads of stories of Ian and Mick Ralphs going into pawn shops and seeing these guitars. Sorry, I was just having a mouthful of tea there. And I think initially what they thought was, well, it says Gibson on the headstock, it must be good. And there's a brilliant story of Mick Ralphs in a pawn shop saying to this guy, how much for that beat up old guitar? And the guy says $75. $75. And Mick Ralphs says, how much? That is way too cheap. And the guy goes, all right. We'll call it $50 and I'll give you the case. So, you look in the early Mott albums, there's Mick playing a two-tone Junior. And, all of us heard this from Leslie West, and what is that guitar? He's playing this tiny little guitar on a big man. And, the cult of Juniors has started. Now, for me, it's just about the only guitar that I feel I can spot. Maybe the quack sound on a Strat, like on Layla. If I hear it on a record, I tend to think that's an out-of-phase Strat. But the Junior sound, to me, it's got a spikiness. It's just got something that I feel, rightly or wrongly, I can identify. If you think of the Dolls playing Bo Diddley's Pills, and you hear it. As I was lying in a hospital bed, there you go, they're even better when they're in tune. And all the Dolls stuff has got that really spiky sound, Fast forward to David Johansen's first solo album with Johnny Rowe and Thomas Trask, who are fabulous guitar players, and it kicks off with Funky But Chic. And it starts with that stinging guitar line, Junior, the thing I played at the start is Intro Sweet Jane by Steve Hunter and Dick Wagner when they played with Lou Reed. That's a good album for, if you wanted to define a Junior sound. As I say, the Dolls, David Johansen, Mott's Wildlife, Mountains Flowers of Evil, Mountains Nantucket Slayer. These are all real Junior sounds. Danny Johnson and Rick Derringer had this, incredible you know, that sound. And although Danny put 2 humbuckers, I think it was a special to begin with, and he then took out the P90s and put in 2 humbuckers, there's just something that gives that sound away, you know, on any of that Derringer stuff. So I've always found that a lot of my favourite records feature this guitar, and for looks, you know, it's just the coolest thing ever. It's a great rhythm sound, and you know, if you think of it, you know, a few years, well, 20 years later, you suddenly got that. You know, on the Georgia Satellites, and they had that. Right, Vito played this, Laurie Weisfield. You know, you hear him playing. You know, that kind of sound. So all these guys that comprise most of my favourite players, Laurie Weisfield, Rick Vito, the legendary Danny Johnson, Steve Hunter, Dick Wagner, Johnny Thunders, and Leslie West, all played this guitar. It's pretty light, you know, I'm not a terribly big guy, even after all the food in the lockdown. So a light guitar is great for me, and it's got a spikiness to it. You know, rather than play a lot of notes, I would hope to think I'd like to play, you know, less notes with more. You know, that kind of stuff that's got a bit of spank about it, you know. And this is the guitar to do this on. So, you know, great rhythm guitar. Or get the tone down. Les Paul Jr.